De'Aaron Fox to the San Antonio Spurs. It's done. A three-team trade involving the Bulls, the Kings, and those San Antonio Spurs, and now land a partner for Victor Wembanyama. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe right here to the channel. We're going to take a look at what this deal is going to look like, what it means for all three teams. Joining me is Donnie Freeman. Donnie, the NBA, this league, it does not stop. The NBA trade deadline undefeated, and now we've got another big trade to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you saw it, but Shams also just put out the full trade. But I mean, I just want to say to anybody that said that, this was a slow deadline or nothing was happening. My God, you really jinxed it. This is absolutely nuts. And we're probably not done. So this is crazy, guys. Make sure you subscribe, by the way, as well to the channel, because we're going to keep you covered with all this information as it comes out here on the Basketball Bulletin.
Oh, we are definitely not done. We've got all the way till Thursday for the NBA trade deadline. But let's take a look at this one, the full trade. The Spurs land De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin. The Kings wind up with Zach Lavine, C.D. Sissoko, 3 first-round picks, the 2025 Charlotte pick, a 2027 Spurs pick, and a 2031 Minnesota pick, and 3 second-round picks, 2025 Chicago, Denver in 2028, and then 2028 the Kings get their own pick back. Then the Bulls get Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and their own 2025 pick back via San Antonio. So let's break this down here in terms of who's going where all these pieces are headed. I think that's actually big for the Bulls that they're getting their own pick back here. But let's start with, of course, the team that everybody's going to focus on, the Spurs. De'Aaron Fox is now the running mate of Victor Wembanyama. What do you think about his addition in San Antonio?
I think he's a perfect fit, like we talked about a lot when his name first started to surface, but before they started going on a win streak and all that stuff. But the thing about the Spurs is they got to keep Castle as well, and didn't have to give up him, didn't have to give up Vassell, they didn't have to really give up a lot of their guys there. They were able to just kind of pull this off, and adding De'Aaron Fox to a team with Wemby already, and they're going to be really good for a long time coming. We talked about how Wemby, if you could just give him a guard and give him a guard where he can be like the star player there, and they could be his number 2, that team could be really good for a long time. And the Spurs are making a move here. Do you think they're going to be in the playoffs this year now?
I think this definitely gives them a really good shot. It'll be interesting to see how the West shakes out. Things very much in flux. We already saw the Lakers make a big trade yesterday with Luka, obviously. But you look at San Antonio right now; they're the 12 seed, but really they're only 2 games back of the Sacramento Kings. Which then begs the question: do the Kings take a step back with this trade, or because they got Zach Lavine? Yeah, does that sustain them? Where does all of this go? But I do think San Antonio has the talent, certainly. I think my question now is, how do we see the Chris Paul and De'Aaron Fox situation working out? Chris Paul obviously only on a 1-year contract, but still, I think that's going to be fascinating to watch. De'Aaron Fox in a backcourt with Chris Paul, plus you're adding in Stephon Castle to the mix. That's going to be interesting now to watch that Spurs backcourt.
Is there any chance that they decide to just waive Chris Paul at this point because they have Castle as well? You don't think that'll happen?
No, they love Chris Paul in San Antonio. I could see if he had to be part of the trade, that maybe they would have put him in. But obviously, they managed to get it done without him. They love him there. I don't think they're gonna move on from it unless something else pops up. I think they're gonna hang on to Chris Paul. I don't see them waiving him, so he'll stick there in San Antonio, and he'll just be a quality backup veteran there with the Spurs. And yeah, man,
good role for your late 30s point guard. That's
sure
pretty good. Like I'm really scared of them. Like we talked about, Wemby getting any help is going to be crazy because Wemby's already insane. So, and he's so young too. And these guys can age together and be very good for years to come. And then whenever you feel like maybe De'Aaron isn't getting it done, well, guess what? You got Castle, and he'll be in his prime or close to his prime. They're going to be really good for a while. So on the Kings bit of it, that's the interesting part of this to me. Is them sneaking in and getting Lavine here, because I thought it was weird that they approached De'Aaron and were like, hey, do you want to get traded? That's interesting because from the Kings perspective, you got to realize that it was going to be extremely tough for them to sell their fan base that had just went through like 17, 18 years of a playoff drought, was finally starting to be fun again, making the playoffs with the light the beam stuff. It was going to be really hard to sell them on another rebuild. And it's also going to be hard to pull off a rebuild when you got other guys like DeMar Sabonis on this team already, and you've got a lot of money invested. You needed to stay competitive. And I think that Zach Lavine is a pretty good consolation prize, especially the way he's been playing this year. I think that's pretty good, and they got those picks, which give them extra flexibility. Like I think they made out like bandits in this trade, personally.
Yeah, I think they did pretty well. The Kings, they got Zach Lavine, and you pair him up again with DeMar DeRozan. We already saw that pairing in Chicago. You've got Sabonis already. The Kings didn't want to lose De'Aaron Fox and just say, that's it, we're done and we're tanking. They've got enough guys who are win-now pieces. Now, the point guard position will be interesting to watch for them. Who's going to handle the ball? How are all these pieces going to shake out? But you still have a team with Zach Lavine. You've got Sabonis. You've got Malik Monk on this team. You've got Keegan Murray, DeRozan. They've got some pieces here for this squad that can still make them formidable. Plus, they're picking up 3 first-round picks, a 2025 Charlotte pick, which I'm sure is protected. Yeah, and then you've got some second-round picks. You get a Spurs pick in the future. You've got a lot of draft capital coming in as well. So you're losing a very, very talented young player, but that's a lot of draft capital coming in for the Sacramento. I mean, this is more draft capital than what the Luka trade had in it. Yeah. And that's impressive. Now, Zach Lavine is no Anthony Davis. There's no question there. But I still think this is a pretty solid return for a Kings team that wants to win right now. And then we'll see what else they have, because I do think they have to restructure a few things here with their roster for this all to really come together. You got a lot of guys, Malik Monk, Lavine, DeMar DeRozan, where their best skill set is putting the ball in the basket. That's the primary thing that they do. And so I do think there needs to be a little bit of balance found. So maybe more moves coming for Sacramento.
They were talked about as potentially getting somebody like John Collins. That's probably off the table because they did have to send out Herter, unless they can maybe put something else together there with their remaining salaries. But, they still have the same deficiencies that they had prior to De'Aaron. They're heavily offense oriented. They still need another big there, and they still have some of the same deficiencies. But I think that with the firsts and seconds and stuff, that gives them so much flexibility to put something together if they wanted to kind of pivot this team and maybe make something else happen. I think they did pretty good for themselves, especially because, like we talked about, Lavine, he was on a quote unquote untradeable contract, but he found himself getting traded, and he was playing awesome, man. And we talked about a lot of times how he's playing awesome, and it sucks because he's kind of locked in. Well, I really like that they put this together for him. Now, on the Bulls piece, I personally don't really care much for what they got. I like Trey Jones, but I don't really care much for what they got. But I think the big part of this that's going to get underrated is that they're getting that pick back, right? Their own pick.
And that certainly matters. They're getting their own pick back. This was the pick that was top 10 protected. So they may have been able to keep this pick anyway, but it would have converted to another pick, I think, the next year down the road. Yeah. So that's pretty big, getting that pick back. It does mean that if the wheels fall off this year, and obviously this is a move where you're losing Zach Lavine, ideally you're going to lose some more games, and this puts them in position to really tank. Now, tanking's not going to be easy. There's already a lot of teams that have really fired up their own tanks, and they're losing plenty of games right now. But getting their own pick back, I think, matters a lot for the Chicago Bulls, and it makes it much more palatable to say, you know what, we're going to bottom out here, we're going to lose, and we're going to get hopefully a nice high draft pick in this year's draft, and we don't have to worry about if we accidentally win too many games, then our pick is suddenly gone, and it would be going to the Spurs.
Getting Zach Collins here tells me there also may be a part 2 to this, where they actually are trading off Vucevic, because they need to get off of him anyway, because his value is at its highest. They need to lose more games, and I think they've kind of found a replacement so they can tank easier in that case. Getting another big in there, so that's probably also part of this too for the Bulls. It just is interesting when the Kings got the best player here, and you could argue about that Lavine contract, but the Kings are getting all the draft capital. The Spurs got the best player in De'Aaron. The Kings are getting all the draft capital, and then they're just kind of getting their own pick. So it kind of can fly under the radar, but I really do like that they got that so they can put themselves in a better position to get something of value.
Yeah, and they do clear future salary here. Zach Collins only under contract for 2 years. Zach Lavine would have been 3 years. Trey Jones
Yeah,
only under, he's an expiring contract. So and then Kevin Huerter is a 2-year contract. So these guys that they're getting, you're freeing up cap space for a couple of years from now, a little bit for this next season with Trey Jones expiring after this year. So this isn't about winning right now for the Chicago Bulls. This is about resetting things. You get that draft capital back. You're able to move on, and it didn't cost you. You didn't have to pay to get Zach Lavine off your books, which is what we were thinking may happen at some point. So good to see this for the Bulls as well. They're picking a direction. And as you said, this could lead to more moves for Chicago as they look to move on from perhaps Nikola Vucevic and some other guys that are on the roster. Maybe we see Alonzo Ball trade, something like that. So I think the Spurs are in good shape. They can still make more moves, but they're in pretty good shape as is. The Kings, I look at this and say, you know what? They might have another move or two in them here after this to kind of balance some things. And then with the Bulls, they certainly are still a seller on the market. They still have pieces to try to send out as they look towards the future. So, we did not see this coming. The Zach Lavine to Sacramento part. We know they had talks over the summer before the DeMar DeRozan trade, but Sacramento really wanting to try to have an opportunity to win right now. So they're going to get Zach Lavine in the deal, and that gives them an opportunity to stay afloat. De'Aaron Fox gets his wish, goes to the Spurs, and then the Bulls get what they want. They get a bit of draft capital and to free up future salary. Perhaps a win-win-win trade here in the NBA. But everybody, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Who won this deal, and just how formidable are the San Antonio Spurs now that they have De'Aaron Fox added to their roster? Everybody, make sure you subscribe right here to the channel. And don't forget to go check out our latest video on Mavs fans losing their mind over the Luka trade. Go check that out right now.